And I'm very happy that we are studying chapter 2, the wedding of at Cana. I love party, and sometimes Monsignor told me you are party animal. I'm fine, I love party anyway. So I start the lesson by telling you a story. Okay. In a church kitchen, several staff who drank the last cup of coffee often forget to fill the pot for the next person. Trying to motivate the staff to be more responsibility, the secretary tapped a neat notice to the pot. If Jesus drank the last cup of coffee, what would he have done? Go and do likewise. And the next morning, she found this crippled response. Jesus would have turned the water into wine instead of coffee. So today we study the first miracle Jesus performed at the wedding at Cana, in which he changed water into wine. It demonstrated his very purpose for coming to earth, to reveal the creative power of God. He had the power to create and produce what was needed to meet people's need. First of all, it is significant that John mentions the third day. Literally, John is referring to the third day after Jesus had left Judea. But he also has particularly noted this because the third day has a symbolic meaning. Remember that John the Apostle wrote his gospel much later than other gospels were written, some 30 or 40 years after these events took place. In fact, by then, he had opportunity to review carefully the events that he had been teaching and preaching about for all that time, and to select from that memory the important things he wanted to stress. So thus everything in the Gospel of John is particularly put there for a reason, right? This mention of the third day is a reference to what is clearly evident elsewhere in the scripture. It is a reference to the fact of the resurrection. The resurrection. That is the significance of the miracle of changing water into wine. Is the miracle of transformation, of bringing life out of death. You see my point here? The occasion was an Eastern wedding. Eastern weddings are very different from the Western weddings. In Western weddings, the bride is the prominent figure. But in Eastern weddings, it is the groom that is prominent. He is the featured one. The bride merely shows up for the wedding. Not only is the groom the featured person, but he also pays for the whole affair. Okay? Some of those weddings went on for 2 or 3 days, some for as long as a week, with all the relatives of both sides of the family joining together for a big celebration. Mary, the mother of Jesus, was there. We note that Joseph was not mentioned. And so it is thought by most commentators that he was already dead. Jesus and his disciples also attended the wedding. It tells us that Jesus was a sociable man. If Jesus was as dreary as we sometimes seem to consider him, he had hardly have been invited to as many parties as he was. In fact, throughout the gospel, whenever Jesus was invited to attend a party, he did not hunker down in a corner. No, he was always in the middle of the action, talking, encouraging celebration, and even turning water into wine to liven up the place a bit. So he was the person of warmth and empathy. So Jesus was teaching us to be more sociable. Man is a social being. He expects us to balance our lives between working and socializing. Secondly, Jesus honored marriage. He demonstrated his approval and honor in two ways: by attending the marriage feast and by meeting the urgent need of the bridegroom. Mary's social concern catches our attention. The need that arose was extremely serious, for the wine was already gone, and the celebration had just begun. The importance of wine in the Middle East must always be remembered for any festive occasion, especially the wedding feast. Without wine, the joyful spirit of the guests was to be dampened. The couple was to be shamed and humiliated, becoming the object of jokes. So Mary was concerned about the matter. But note the point. Mary's concern was a social concern, a concern for seeing that the needs of a social group were met. She did what any other would do. She brought the problem to her son. They have no wine. Here, allow me to go a little bit outside of the traditional interpretations about Mary's sympathetic intention. I'm sorry, the statue of Mary is here, but the scenario described in the gospel, cannot prevent me from thinking from our human perspectives. So is that okay for you? All right. Perhaps only Mary and Jesus were invited to the wedding feast. Only Mary and Jesus were invited. But suddenly, Jesus brought 5 to 6 strange men to be with him at the party. Right? And remember, Eastern countries, they don't have plenty of food and drink like this country, right? So some of the commentators suggest that what Mary meant is that Jesus and his disciples ought to leave since the wine were out. You see, that this was a gentle hint to them that they were unwanted addition to the marriage feast, that they had strained the hospitality of their host, and they ought to leave. We didn't invite you. We didn't invite your disciples. So come on. Why we're out now? Okay? Others say that Mary did not expect any miracle because Jesus had done no miracle up to this point. John clearly says that this is the first miracle that our Lord did. When I studied Bible in the seminary, the professor, based on the description of the wedding scenario, said that Mary did expect her son to do something startling and supernatural, since he first had a group of followers. Basically, Mary wanted her son to make some impression toward his disciples. In other words, Mary wanted her son to demonstrate himself with an amazing miracle to his disciples so that they can believe in him as a true Messiah. We must understand that at this time, Mary's expectation had been greatly awakened. Undoubtedly, she had been told the accounts of what happened in Judea, how Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist, how the heavens opened and the dove lighted on Jesus' head, and the voice uttered those remarkable words, "This is my beloved Son." And she remembered the promises when Jesus was born that he would be the Messiah. But Mary could not understand what type of Messiah her son would be. There's too many definitions of Messiah at that time. And Mary couldn't understand what type. She had been waiting for 30 years without seeing anything that could demonstrate her son as the one. Undoubtedly, she expected him to act. So along with all the other Jews of that day, she expected him as the Messiah to claim the throne of David, to somehow try out the Romans, and to fulfill all the messianic prophecies of the Old Testament. Now that Jesus has taken the initiative and has called his own disciples, she has the right to expect that he is beginning to fulfill his destiny. The fact that Jesus clearly understood her can be seen from his answer. "Woman, what do I have to do with you?" That answer was not rude or disrespectful, though it may sound that way to us. Here, Jesus was using a common title of respect, equivalent to lady in English. Have you ever heard any son or daughter call their mother lady? I guess. So remember, Jesus addresses Mary from the cross in the same way. "Woman, lady, behold your son." And most theologians have interpreted that Jesus meant his mother as the second Eve in comparison with the first Eve. And remember, the first Eve was called woman by Adam also. When Jesus says, "What do I have to do with you?" that is simply a Hebrew way of saying, "You don't understand." So what he is saying is not that he will not do something. He does not mean that he will not act, because he did act. He means, what I do will not accomplish what you are hoping of who I am. I will not persuade the nation that I am the Messiah who will liberate Israel out of Roman oppressors. That is what Jesus is doing here with Mary. Perhaps he means to suggest to her the fulfillment of the prophecy that was given her when Jesus was presented at the temple. "A sword will pierce even your own soul." Jesus is reminding her that there is coming a time when those words must be fulfilled as well. And Mary seemed to be satisfied with his response and said to the servants, "Whatever he says to you, do it." Again, I stop right here and remind you that was out of our traditional belief. Okay? All right. So let us go back to our traditional belief. The account makes clear that Mary did expect Jesus to help. She comes to him with a problem and expects him to do something about it. Then we see Jesus' deeper concern. In Mary's concern, Jesus saw a unique opportunity to begin bringing Mary into the light of the truth of who he was, the Son of God who had entered the world for a particular hour. When you hear the word hour in John's Gospel, that means the cross, the hour of the cross. The opening of the story of the wedding at Cana. Suppose you are a writer. I don't think you will open something like what? Let me see. It said, and on the third day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. And Jesus also was invited, and his disciple to the wedding. If I were the author of St. John, I would combine it, right? There was Mary, mother of Jesus, and her son, Jesus. No, the author didn't do that. He separated Mary at one side. He didn't even mention the name Mary, the mother of Jesus, one side right there. And this side, Jesus and his disciples. The author had a reason. The author wanted to let the readers know that Mary was also a disciple of Jesus as well, different than other Gospels. Another Gospel said that Mary already knew who Jesus was. John's Gospel is different. John's Gospel said that from the beginning, Mary was set aside by herself until the end, that eventually she became Jesus' disciple on Golgotha. At that time, she and Jesus are together. Okay? So, Mary needed to understand Jesus' person, true mission, or messiahship. And therefore, at the very beginning of his ministry, Jesus began to teach everyone, including his mother. He wanted to do all he could to prepare her and the others for the terrible pain that was to come during his hour. Jesus used every opportunity possible to familiarize his mother and all the disciples with the phrase, "my hour." His hour was to become a constant symbol of his death. For example, Jesus said, "The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified." Or, "Now my soul has become troubled, and what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour. But for this purpose I came to this hour." Or before the feast of the Passover, Jesus, knowing that his hour had come, that he should depart out of this world to the Father. And so we see Jesus was always focused upon his purpose for coming to earth, to face his hour, to die for man's salvation. Mary's concern picture the social concern of man. Man has many social needs: health, comfort, plenty, peace, justice. And Christ met the social concern, the need. He solved the problems. However, Christ does not stop there. Meeting with the physical and material needs of society is not enough. Christ met the deeper concern of man: life, assurance, happiness, fulfillment, love, completeness. And he assures us with his promise, "I came that they might have life and might have it abundantly. Then we see that Mary had great confidence in her son. Perhaps it is unthinkable that Mary was asking Jesus to perform a miracle. So far as we know, he, at the age of 30, had performed no miracles yet. But Mary had utter confidence in him. The thick water pots were used both for drinking water and for the purifying and cleansing of the Jews. And when the Jews saw the water pots, he knew they were there both for satisfying his thirst and for his religious cleansing. So Jesus used the water pots to show that he had the power to purify, cleanse, and satisfy man, to create and produce whatever was necessary to cleanse and satisfy man. In other words, Jesus had a deeper concern than just meeting the social need of the host. He had come to meet man's need for spiritual purification and inner cleansing. And remember, he was doing it through his hour, his cross. Note another significant point. Jesus simply instructed that preparations be made. And when people obeyed him, they experienced his creative power and were fully satisfied. It tells us that we have to obey Christ's instructions if we wish to be cleansed and created spiritually. Jesus said, "He who has my commandments and keeps them, he it is who loves me, and he who loves me shall be loved by my Father, and I will love him and will disclose myself to him." We also notice another aspect of the account. Jesus says simply, "Fill the water pots with water." Very simple command. Fill the water pots with water. And the servants fill them to the brim with 120 to 180 gallons of water. Why? If I was those servants, one of those servants, I would have done it. I didn't care, right? Water in 180 gallons. That's a lot of water, a lot of labor here. So why do I need to fill the water to the brim? You know the brim? So it may demonstrate the fact that the water had changed into wine when it was poured into the water pots. And because there were only 6 water pots there, the servants had to maximize the amount of wine by putting it up to the brim. Right? Some claim that Jesus did not change water into real wine, but all he did was dilute the remaining wine with more water. Clearly, the diluted wine would be worse than the original wine, right? But the gospel reports that the water was changed into good wine. This is confirmed by the amazement of the steward of the feast when he drank the wine. The significance of this miracle is recorded in one verse, in verse 11. This beginning of his signs, remember that, Jesus did in Cana of Galilee and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. A little boy sat through a Sunday school class and learned about the time Jesus went to a wedding and made water into wine. And what did you learn from that story? Asked his father afterward. The boy thought for a moment and answered, "If you're having a wedding, make sure Jesus is there." I hope that this is not only what we learn from the miracle of changing water into wine. There are more significant factors in the miracle itself. First, John says that the miracle was a sign. Signs are not merely miracles without any meaning. They are miracles that have a meaning. They are intended to convey truth that would not otherwise be known. The sign is to tell us something that we would not otherwise know, to manifest a significance that might otherwise be hidden. That is what John means when he says that this miracle was a sign. Perhaps what it pictured was the normal outcome of the combination of human and divine activity. Men can fill water pots. Only God can turn water into wine. Men do the ordinary, the commonplace, the normal activity. But God touches it, and brings it to life and gives it flavor, fragrance, and effect. And that is the meaning of this sign. It is an indication of what the ministry of Jesus is going to be like whenever he touches a human life. Not only during his lifetime on earth, but also through all the generations to come, whenever his ministry would be present in the world. Thus, it affects us today as well. Bring God into our situation, and all the routine, commonplace activities are touched with a new power that makes them fragrant, flavorful, enjoyable, and delightful, giving joy and gladness to the heart. That is the meaning of this sign. According to John, the second thing is, it manifested his glory. Six water pots were also significant number. According to Jewish religious belief, number 6 is the imperfect number. Number 6 is the imperfect number. Though Jesus changed water into wine for those 6 water pots, they could only satisfy physical and social needs, but not spiritual needs. Number 7 is the perfect number. By doing this miracle, Jesus demonstrated that he is the water pot number 7 that can satisfy every spiritual need: life assurance, happiness, fulfillment, love, satisfaction. No wonder the third factor John brings out is his disciples believed in him. They believed that he was the man of God. He was one who could handle life. He was one who could take the ordinary, simple, commonplace thing and make it a source of joy, of glory, and of warmth. And this is the significance for us of this sign. Our Lord is able to take the humdrum, commonplace, ordinary, normal events of daily life, and with his touch, make them full of flavor, fragrance, strength, and beauty. We will do this with any of us as we faithfully walk with him, follow him, and believe in him. And that is why John highlights for us the disciples believed in him. Do we? Thank you very much for listening.